Hi there everyone, Foxy Fern here, and welcome back to Animating a Squirrel in Maya. Today we're going to continue applying the process that we were using last time into the rest of the hops on this animation. So here's a little refresher of what our animation is looking like so far. And yeah, we're just gonna go ahead and add a little bit of that stretch and squash to all the other hops. And then maybe we'll get into some of his personality on his little look. So since the end of this animation is a little bit different than the beginning of it, I'm not going to really copy and paste his stretching and squashing from his first two jumps, since they were very big jumps and now we're doing the little hops. But I can animate the initial hop and then copy that animation onto the following ones. I think I'm going to do just the basic of the little, the squirrel noticing us here before we have him hop away, though, just to make sure that I have the right amount of timing there, because it's hard to tell sometimes. It feels like it's enough time for the squirrel to, be shocked and see you and then decide to run away. But without, all the stretch and squash and anticipation for that motion, it's a little hard to tell sometimes. And it'll be easier to shift the timing if we haven't added, a whole bunch of keyframes at the end of the animation before doing that. So I want him to kind of, as though he's about ready to make his next hop is when he stops and notices us there. So he's going to come up a little bit first. We might actually need to add a bit more time in that case to this first little bit here. I don't really need my camera view right now, so I'm just going to look in my perspective view here. So let's go ahead and add, he's going to have a little bit of a jiggle, since it's right now it's he's bouncing down, and then as his body's coming back up, he's kind of using that momentum to go into his next jump. But since he's stopping, he's going to have a little bit of a boing as he, the rest of his body wants to continue on in that jump, but he's making it stop. So we'll take care of that first. All right, guys, I think I have the little character bit timed out the way I want here. You can see him jump in. He's like, oh, what? Oh, God, get me out of here. So I'm thinking that looks pretty good for now. Obviously, we've still got some polish that we'll be doing on the end, but I mostly wanted to get just like the overall feel of that, like, hey, who's there? And how long we wanted the character to stay there before he hops off the screen. I basically decided to just have him be there long enough to like kind of let the little bouncing settle before he takes off again. Since he doesn't have a face, there's not like going to be as much of an interest for him to hang out there very long, because we're not going to see him like, you know, with scared eyes or anything like that. So it all has to be in the body language. And don't forget, at the end of this animation, we are going to add back in the tail, so we can use the tail as a little bit of personality too, like if that little flick that like a squirrel will do. We'll watch some video reference on how squirrels move their tails before we get too deep into animating the tail, but as stated earlier, we are just for now focusing on the body part of the squirrel. So I did add a couple of frames in for him to settle there than what we had before he hops off the screen, but it was pretty close. Like it was not too far off. I had to fiddle around with the bouncing a lot, as you noticed. Like it was tricky to kind of get the feel of the squirrel noticing us. He's not like, I kind of wanted to do a sort of double take kind of thing, but there's not really a whole lot of time. If our character had eyes, I would have like, he'd be hopping in and I'd have like his eyes dart over and kind of do a double take, but it would take a lot of extra time to really sell the whole like head doing a double take with this character. So I think it's just going to be a, oh crap, all of a sudden I see you, and then run away. But let's go ahead and go back into this anticipation. I think there's a possibility we're maybe going to need to speed up the end of him hopping away, because I kind of want to give him a sense of urgency, not just like, oh yeah, whatever, I was startled by you and now I'm leaving. So we'll see how that feels once we get our mechanics in there, because without the stretch and squash, it definitely doesn't look fast enough. But let's throw in a anticipation here. So we'll grab the head again, and I don't know if obviously if this is going to be where he takes off from the ground, then that can't be our anticipation pose. So let's maybe kill one frame from this. We'll scoot those over, just one. And then we'll have our anticipation pose be on frame 59. So I'm going to go ahead and zero these out just to kind of bring us back home again. Actually, I take that back. We're going to kind of just take a little bit of what the computer gives us there to give it a bit of a more organic twist instead of going all the way back to zero. But I do want his head to start turning before the rest of his body squishes down, which actually that's all in his head, because this part isn't doing anything right now. Speaking of which, maybe if we add that properly to this, that will be good enough. We'll have him not quite square off with the direction he's heading before he takes off. So let's see, maybe right here will be a good spot. And his body is gonna follow his head, so we'll scoot these frames over. I don't know how noticeable that's gonna be, since this is like a super squishy character, but one thing we can do is have the rotation start a frame earlier than his squashing down. So let's see. And we can also grab the rotate Y, and instead of this just being like a really gradual curve here, we can tweak this a bit so that his head kind of snaps back to the direction he's going in a little bit of urgency here. Okay, so we'll make sure to have him go back to this little arc here of pulling himself up. Let's have him kind of do some squishing back here. A little bit more anticipation. And then we want his head to dip down before actually taking off there. All right, that's good for now. So we go ahead and add in the other parts to this little hop here. Let's give him that stretch as he's pulling away from the ground. Really want to squish him down there. And this should be his stretchiest frame right there. Probably gonna delete this key. Let's see. No, I don't know. We'll see. That might just be part of the polish phase. Okay, so we'll check our base here. This isn't quite an even hop here. Let's go ahead and make those a little bit more even. Don't forget to make sure that your tangents going in and out of the jump are not spline. Oops. Let's see. I moved our translate Y, but I did not move our translate Z. So let's make sure that doesn't happen twice. Gotta make sure these guys are lined up. So... And don't forget to make your translate Z linear as well. So once again, we'll go to our high point here on our frame. And this is where our squirrel's head will line back up with the cog, the center of gravity. See how much just a little bit of rotation there in this little bottom here can really add to that feeling of weight. If we push it back, actually, okay, we're gonna add a little bit more to that with this middle control once we get our base down here. And then this is our contact pose again. So we'll have another stretch. Again, this isn't going to be quite as exaggerated as it was in the first two hops because he's not going up in the air near as much, but we still need to have a little bit here. Once again, I will copy this frame, 61 to 71, and we'll see how that looks. I'm actually going to shorten my timeline. Whoops. Or drag it over. Because we don't... Right now, we're not focused on the first part of this animation. Right now, we're just getting the end of it and the mechanics looking right. So we'll just include the very end of his reaction and the rest of the animation here. All right. I'm going to go ahead and apply this stuff to the remaining hops. And then we'll see how that looks. Okay guys, I'm feeling pretty good about how this is shaping up here. we didn't have to do too much movement with the timing. Once I added some stretch and squash to each of those little hops, it was feeling pretty good. So one small detail I'd like to point out about this that could help you really kind of sell the organicness of your animations is that you'll see that even though he's going in 3 quick hops here at the end, these hops aren't all exactly the same. So if you look at my cog control here, on our translate Y, you can see that each hop is getting a little bit lower. The other thing is that this first hop is 2 frames longer, 1 frame on each side of the arc, than the next 2 hops. So it kind of breaks up the timing a little bit, and you can sort of feel it where he's like, boom, boom, boom. So it's not bump, bump, bump. It's more boom, boom, boom. And obviously that was a bit of an exaggeration that I was using, but you get the idea there. So same thing with his first couple of hops coming in here. I mean, that's really extreme, but there's not one single hop exactly the same. It's just like a snowflake in this animation. They're all different heights. And aside from the last 2, they are also all different lengths. These are both 6 frames each, because if you get less than 6 frames, it kind of just starts to feel like a little bit of a vibration. So I didn't shorten them below 6 frames each. But yeah, you can see there is some pretty nice feeling to it. And I think I'm going to stick with the timing here. It's got a nice rhythm to it. 1, 2, what? Bump, bump, bump. I think that's got a pretty good feeling there with his rear too. You can kind of see it rotating a little bit at the bottom there. Let me make this bigger up here so you can see. You can see how it's angled this way at first, and then it angles the other way as he's reaching the bottom. Kind of more like in this beginning here, he's really leading with his head to pull himself out of those hops, but at the end he's just kind of like, oh crap, I gotta get out of here. So it's not as exaggerated of mechanics. Okay, so the next step here is to really go in and check our curves and our silhouettes, and probably also add a little bit of animation to like his ears here, since we can animate these. I'm gonna get this smaller and out of my way now. Since we can animate these ears, we might as well make use of that, just to kind of add a little bit of extra flair to it. Now let's see, his teeth. Oh yeah, we could also make his mouth open as he's hopping, so he's like, ha, ha, ha. I don't know how that's gonna look. It's a thing to try. This is the stage where we get to try some things. We have our base mechanics down, which reminds me, I'm going to save that right now. And the other thing we could do is potentially use some animation layers here for anything that we want to add something to without removing what we have there. That's the thing I really like about animation layers, is if we did want to experiment with his head and looking at us, you see we've got all these keyframes saved on here right now, and if I try to be like, oh, I want him to look at us like this, or maybe I actually kind of like that arc, how instead of we can really push it, instead of it just being a perfect profile view of the camera, we can really start to push these arcs here. But the best way I feel to do that is by using an animation layer. For now though, since we don't have really any animation on this middle control, we'll do that first and see what that's going to give us. So this first silhouette here, I feel like he's coming down too straight from the top. It's like, here, how about we do this? We're going to grab our head control and we will make if I can remember where it is, visualize, Create editable motion trail. Let's just make sure our settings are correct here. So we want the time range to be in the time slider. I don't really need it outside of the time slider. Increment, 1 frame, always draw when selected. So these two, basically it will affect like the speed of your Maya software. If you choose draw when selected, then it's not going to like be constantly updating every time we change something, but I'm not terribly worried about that right now, so we're going to go ahead and have that motion trail there and see what this looks like. We're also going to, actually, the bottom one, I don't care, the cog I don't care too much about, but let's give a motion trail to this guy as well. That might be a little distracting. We're gonna fix this top one up here first. Now, one thing to keep in mind is sometimes when a control is parented under another control, it's going to give you not quite the exact idea of what your motion control is, what your animation curve is looking like. But this, I feel it's pretty accurate. So I'm liking this this is the first time I looked at the animation curve or the motion trail. So one thing I really like here is that he's not just coming like straight up and down when he goes into his like little reaction. Because my idea was like, oh, we want it to feel really organic. So it's going to kind of like come forward and back and move in all 3 axes as he is settling into that. And I think we can push that even more, but you can see we've got this nice little curly Q right here. So first things first, we're going to fix this one. Now, one thing, you can actually grab these points on the animation trail, and by moving it around, oh, I guess I was wrong. I thought, okay, maybe it's just not updating. Yeah, all right. So for some reason, our Maya isn't updating when I grab this control, but if you look, it is affecting these curves. You can see the keys in the graph editor moving, but it's not updating in our viewport in real time for some reason, but that's okay. And obviously that's not going to demonstrate for you what the rotation looks like. So I'm still going to go in here and grab that guy. Now it's not perfect at the top of this here, but I'm not terribly concerned about that since we are animating to the camera. I do still like to look in all axes to make sure it actually looks like our character has like proper balance and everything. But right now, since we're just animating to the camera, I'm not concerned too much with these off-screen bits here. One interesting thing you can do too to check the spacing with these animation curves, you're not actually going to see anything that there's not a key on. So what we can do, I'm going to go ahead and just save this. But if we would have to actually save a key on every single one of these to really see what our spacing is looking like. And in this case, I think it's okay to do that. And then we can always go in and clean up the curves later if we want. But you can see that like this curve isn't looking super smooth right here. And it's got a bunch of really close spacing together, and then it starts spreading out really fast. So let's go ahead and fix that. Okay, so that's looking better, and I'm just going to go in here and clean up these keys right there, just so that we have this nice curve, but now I have a better idea of where I want that curve to go. I think, in hindsight, the one we really want to look at right now is his bottom area. So we'll go ahead and just delete that curve. Make sure you're deleting the curve and not the control. And we'll make a motion trail for this guy here. And once again, because there's not a whole lot of keys on this one, since it's kind of following the cog, it's not going to give us a super accurate representation of the spacing, but I am liking, for the most part, this curve looks pretty good, honestly. We might try changing these into a little bit sharper here. And now for some reason, this seems a little lopsided on this curve here. Do I have, let's see, how many frames is this? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. That's probably part of it here. Is this guy too? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Well, that's strange. I didn't quite evenly space this hop. I don't think I'm going to change the cog because I actually really like the feel of it. But let's see what we can do maybe about fixing this curve here. All right, for this control, I'm not sure we actually do want the tangents to be like that, since it's actually because it's kind of inheriting the movement from the cog. It's not super necessary to do that with this bit. So, all right, well, that's not too bad. So we'll do one more check here. We will just look at this cog control and see what that looks like. I think it's just because our curve isn't quite even here. We're just gonna cheat this a little bit. Okay. Yeah, that's feeling pretty good to me. So I think our curves are fine on our body controls for this guy. So now it's just a matter of really adding some like twist into him and giving it like that extra oomph of polish. And then after that, we'll finally get into the tail. So next video, we'll pay attention to the things like the ears and giving him like this twistiness that I was talking about, and maybe like opening his mouth a little bit. And then it'll probably be the following video that we finally get around to the tail. But as long as we have a solid base going well for us, the tail should be fairly easy. It would be a huge shame to like animate the tail, make it look really nice, and then be like, oh, well, this timing isn't working or the body motion isn't working, and then it's gonna have a ripple effect of everything down the line, since the tail is pretty much secondary motion. We might add a little bit of personality to it, like the little twitches that squirrels do. I'll look for a video so that I can reference it next time and show you guys what I'm talking about. But for the most part, it's basically going to be a secondary action bit on this character. That is going to do it for this part of the animation. I hope you guys are enjoying this series, and I look forward to seeing you next time. Until then, take care.